Coming up on today's show, I discuss one area of improvement, one stat that I'm going to be tracking next season for each Lakers player. Let's get into it.
Jovan Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, NBA reporter for Buha's Block, and welcome to another episode. On today's show, we're going to be discussing one realistic area of improvement for each Lakers player, one stat that I am going to be focusing on for each of them for next season. This is an episode I did before the start of last season, and interestingly, a few of these guys, I'm actually going to give them the same category, the same area of improvement for this season, a few of the returning Lakers players. So we'll get into all of that. But before we get started, you guys know the drill. Please be sure to hit that subscribe button if you have not yet done so, on the road to 30,000 subscribers before the season starts. So it would mean the world to me if you hit that subscribe button. Also be sure to turn on channel notifications and like and comment. All right, the first player we're going to be discussing today is Luka Doncic, and my focus for Luka is his 2-point percentage. So I'm going to pull up some charts, some tables, some graphs. We got it all in today's episode. Looking at this chart here per Cleaning the Glass, Luka shot just 49.3% on twos last season as a Laker. It was in only 28 games, which is a small sample size, but it's all we have to go off of. And if you look at it, that was the lowest 2-point percentage of Luka's career. And really the only other season that was close was his rookie season. So I thought that was interesting. Luka has typically been in that 80th to 90th percentile in terms of 2-point shooters as a wing or a point guard. But last year he was just in the 44th percentile and shot under 50% for the first time in his career. And if you look at some of the areas where he regressed at the rim with the second lowest field goal percentage at the rim of his career, with only his rookie season being lower. He also regressed in the short mid-range as well as the long mid-range and the mid-range overall. So from really all facets of inside the arc, he was worse with the Lakers compared to earlier in the season in Dallas, and really compared to most of his career in Dallas. And I think this is the part of Luka's game that will benefit most from his physical transformation of reshaping his body, getting into better shape, better conditioning, and being able to, I think, beat mismatches more with bigs and getting downhill, splitting double teams, splitting blitzes and hedges. I did an in-depth film breakdown of Luka's performance at Eurobasket and some of the ways that he has looked quicker and been more explosive at the point of attack offensively and beating guys with his first step and beating different screening coverages. So I think Luka's ability to get downhill and pressure the rim and finish through traffic, finish over bigs, finish over smaller players. It's also going to show up in his post game. It's going to show up in his step backs, his mid-range game. I think last year we saw that there were several instances a game where he'd have a big switched on to him and he would just take the step back three. And he's great at that. And I expect that to be a part of his game because he hits that shot at a very high level. But I also think there should be instances in which he beats that guy off the dribble and puts pressure on the rim. And that either allows him to get to the rim, draw a foul, or create a potential catch and shoot opportunity for a teammate, or maybe it gets the defense in a blender and then all of a sudden the Lakers, it's a ping action, and now someone on the opposite side is able to rack a closeout and get to the rim. And if he can progress to the mean with his 2-point shooting and resemble the player that he's been for most of his career, and I think we will see that, if not potentially at an even higher level with the newfound quickness and just the slimmer body. Like, I think that's how you put yourself in that best player in the world conversation. That's how you put yourself in the MVP conversation. And that's what I'm expecting for next season. Next up is LeBron James. And last season, I highlighted LeBron's increasing turnovers And that was an issue for him again in the regular season. His turnover percentage and turnovers per 36 minutes and per possession actually went up again after I highlighted that. So that is something to monitor. And it is a part of LeBron's game that I feel like has regressed slightly. And you'll see these 5, 6, 7 turnover games at a rate that you wouldn't have seen it prior. But for me, my focus is actually going to be on shot attempts, and it's shot attempts at the rim. Looking at LeBron's cleaning the glass splits, he only attempted 35% of his shots at the rim last season, which is tied for the second fewest in his career. And when shifting him to a big, which he played more 4 and 5 last season, that put him in just the 29th percentile of all bigs. And I will note that if you shift him back to being a forward or a wing, as he can play, I mean, he's the most versatile player, arguably, of all time, that percentile would of course increase probably closer to 50% or even into the 60th percentile. But comparing him 2 seasons ago to last season, there's a stark decrease. You saw 2 seasons ago, 47% of his shots were at the rim. This past season, 35% at the rim. And you saw an uptick in three-pointers from 26% of all shots 2 years ago to 28% last season. You also saw an uptick in the mid-range from 28% 2 seasons ago to 37%. So LeBron became a bit more jump shot heavy last season, and that's okay because he is a good to great jump shooter depending on the area, and that's a part of his game that has increasingly improved throughout the course of his career. But LeBron is arguably the best non-center finisher of all time, and LeBron at the rim is easy money. LeBron is always among the best finishers in the league. I think for the Lakers offense, and this is maybe LeBron screening a little bit more and more two-man game with LeBron and Luka, LeBron and Austin, whatever it is, I think the Lakers need to do a better job of getting LeBron easier shots, getting him around the basket more, and maybe that's some deep seal post-ups and different actions you can run to get him closer to the basket. But and look, maybe part of this is he's about to be 41, year 23, and the wear and tear of playing in the paint is a little bit too much for him. And he's calculated that he wants to be a little bit more jump shot reliant and play more in the mid range, play more in the elbow areas, take more threes. And again, he's improved in all those areas to the point where they're not bad shots. It's just more so. And he remains an efficient true shooting percentage, all that stuff. Even looking at his effective field goal percentage, 57%, 53rd percentile for bigs. But again, if we put that more in that range for wings or forwards, he's going to be above average even more. So it's hard to critique a player who's arguably the greatest player of all time and is also the greatest player we've ever seen this late into their career and is in uncharted territory with playing in year 23, first player in NBA history, but also playing at this level, being an all-NBA guy, all-star guy into his 40s. Like, we just have never seen that before. So if this is how, like, this is LeBron's new normal and he has to be a little bit more jump shot reliant, then that's okay. I do think it changes the way the Lakers offense functions, and I do think it potentially changes their offensive ceiling. But if he can, whether it's cutting or post-ups, more pick and roll as a roll man, whatever it is, I think they need to find ways to get him closer to the basket, closer to the rim, and leverage his amazing ability to finish over everybody. And so I think this should be a big focus for the Lakers coaching staff, is how can we get LeBron closer to the basket more consistently. The next player is Austin Reaves, and this is the first one where I'm going to recycle last season's area of improvement and monitor it again this season. And for Austin, it's going to be his three-point shooting, specifically his catch and shoot three-point shooting. But last year I talked about both. I think the big one to monitor is the catch and shoot percentage, especially playing next to Luka Doncic and LeBron and playing a bit more off ball in the playoffs. So looking at it here, Austin's regular season catch and shoot three-point percentage has consistently been going up. 36%, 40%, 37%, 40%. So in the regular season, he has been a reliable catch and shoot three-point shooter. But you look at the playoffs, 47% during the Lakers Western Conference Finals run, which is insane. And we can look at the volume a little bit lower. I put the volume just for context in the second part of the table. But that dipped to 17% against Denver in 2024, and then 35% against Minnesota in 2025. And only 5 games in each series, right? And you could cherry pick and go through most any shooter outside of maybe Steph and find a 5-game sample where they're going to shoot 17% on catch and shoot threes or 35% on catch and shoot threes. But the playoffs are a small sample size. I always say this, and those numbers carry a bit more weight. And it's just like if you shoot 17% in a playoff series on catch and shoot threes, that's going to affect your team's chances if you are one of your team's best players, if you are one of your team's best shooters. So we have seen a decline in Austin's catch and shoot 3-point shooting. Again, there's some randomness in here, small sample size alert, but I think it is worth mentioning and highlighting. His pull-up 3-point percentage has been a bit more stable. If you look year over year, rookie season, they don't make the playoffs. In his second season, it dips by like 1%. Third season dips by about 1.5%. And then again, in the playoffs against Minnesota, that dipped a lot by about 7%. But randomness, 5-game sample, etc. I think of note, you see a stark increase in Austin's catch and shoot attempts during the playoffs this past postseason. So he had never attempted more than 3.8 per game. That was the 2023 run. And he had never attempted more than 4 per game in the regular season. And that jumped up to almost 6 per game against Minnesota in the first round. And so I think that needs to be Austin's focus this year. It should have been the focus this summer, or one of the focuses is come playoff time, the ball is going to be in Luka's hands, and assuming that LeBron is going to be there, it's also going to be in LeBron's hands. And those are going to be the 2 focal points of the offense. And Austin has to be able to take and make catch and shoot threes. I think he's shown a willingness to take them, and there has been that volume increase, but I think he needs to shoot better on those. And he's dealt with some injuries, and there's been some progressive wear and tear later in the season for him. And he's a guy who hates the rest, and he will play through things. And I think sometimes that has hurt him. But the stat I constantly reference is Jalen Brunson and Kyrie Irving during the conference finals and finals runs respectively next to Luka, both shot 40+% on catch and shoot threes in the playoffs during those runs. And I think that's the key to being an offensive minded guard next to Luka. It can work. We've seen him go to the conference finals and finals with that player archetype, but that player better be shooting 40+% on catch and shoot threes, or at least I would say like 38+%. It has to be above average. It has to be decently above average. So we're talking about a matter of percentages here, very few percentages and small sample size. But I think Austin's catch and shoot ability later in the season has to be better, has to be more consistent. And I think if he does that, Luka and Austin were really good together last season. I've referenced this. They had a +20 net rating when LeBron was off the floor. So I have confidence that those two can fit and work together as a duo. I do think one thing that will ultimately dictate their playoff ceiling is Austin's ability to play off the ball and be a catch and shoot threat. So I think Austin, if he can bounce back and be more, doesn't have to be 47% like he shot during the conference finals run, but if he can be closer to 38 to 42%, somewhere in that range, and hold up better physically, I think we're talking about a really good player who will complement Luka well. The next player is Deandre Ayton, and my focus for him is his pick and roll defense. And so I have his synergy numbers looking at him defending pick and roll ball handlers and also looking at him defending pick and roll rollmen. I got his points per possession and the percentile. So looking at his career, he's often been, especially for a big man, and this is tracking all players' points per possession defending pick and roll ball handlers. All things considered, he's been pretty good defending pick and roll ball handlers, whether that's guards or wings, and sometimes switching on to them or being in mismatches, whatever. He's held up fairly well. If you look at through his first 6 seasons, in 4 of those, he was 60% or better in terms of percentile of points per possession allowed. He did have a couple of down years in 2020 and 2023, but he's been pretty solid defending ball handlers in the pick and roll. This past year dropped all the way down to 10th percentile. And this is where I have some issue with Portland's scheme, and they're using him in such a deep drop that I don't think played to his strengths defensively. And I think it brought out some of his bad habits of when people want to mention his low motor or low activity or just kind of floating out there. I think if you are putting him in a low activity role, basically just drop back and try to protect the rim, that's going to invite some of those bad habits. So I think having him be more active on the defensive end in pick and roll coverages, whether it's a higher drop or whether it's up to touch or mixing in some hedging, some blitzing, some trapping, whatever it is, I think having him in a higher activity role defensively in terms of his pick and roll coverages will be better for him. And that is what Phoenix did earlier in his career. Then looking at the pick and roll man points per possession, this one's more of a mixed bag. If you look at it, you got like 59th percentile, 74th, 63rd. Those are all solid. But then you also have 24th and 47th. I'm not referencing the Portland numbers because those have both been bad. But a little bit more of a mixed bag with defending role men. But I think the environment in Portland, being in a losing environment and being in this weird situation where they have a million centers and you know these guys are your replacement, you know this is a temporary situation, and then I'm sure on some level missing what was going on in Phoenix and being a 60-win team, being going to the finals, all that stuff. Like, I just think we didn't see the best performance defensively from Deandre Ayton, even though a lot of his metrics are still solid to good. And so I think the big thing with Ayton is how the Lakers use him defensively. And I don't think putting him in a deep drop is the way to go. I think leveraging his mobility and athleticism on the perimeter, especially as a big, is one way to do it. I don't think he's quite Jaxson Hayes level or AD level of just you can switch everything with him, but I think selective switching maybe onto some wings, depending on who the player is. Like, I think he switched on to Giannis and did really well defending him last season. So that's an example of a player like Giannis or Zion, someone like that. Like some of these bigger wings, I think he can switch onto and hold his own. Some of the quicker guards, I think it really, again, it's a lot of context and very matchup based. But I think the Lakers need to do a better job of mixing things up with DeAndre Ayton in terms of his pick and roll defense. And I think if you do that and keep him engaged and active on that end, I think you'll see a better performance. Next up is Rui Hachimura. And for this one, I'm also going to recycle Rui's area of improvement from last season. And that was his defensive rebounding. And so looking at his cleaning the glass chart here, he has regressed as a defensive rebounder. And the interesting thing is he's actually played more big over the last couple seasons and actually played more big this past season as either a small ball 5 or a 4 next to LeBron or DFS in small ball looks. So the fact that his field goal defensive rebound percentage has progressively decreased throughout his career. You look at it, his high was his rookie year, 14.7%, but that's continually gone down. 13% back up to 14, then down to 13, back up to 14. And then with the Lakers, it's been 14 for the 33 games he played during the 2022-23 season. But then it's been 11.5 2 seasons ago, and then just 10.4 this past season, which among forwards, that's 43rd percentile with the 11.5 and then 28th percentile with the 10.4. So I think at this point, Rui is who he is. I don't expect him to become some wing stopper or defend 3s and 2s at a high level. I think he's improved a lot in both regards, but at this point, like we know what Rui is, and he's really improved as a shooter. He's really improved as a cutter, and he's a valuable weapon for the Lakers offensively. I still think the rebounding, though, can be better. He's improved as an offensive rebounder and is slightly above average in that regard, but he's been trending the wrong direction defensively, despite playing in smaller lineups, smaller groups. And yes, he's playing next to Luka and LeBron and Vando, and like those guys are really good rebounders for their positions respectively. But I think sometimes the boxing out, the awareness, and just the chasing the ball can be better with Rui. So I don't really have much to tweak with him. I'm not saying like he needs to work on his ball handling, his passing, his decision making. Like I think Rui is close to a fully formed product at this point, but we have seen spurts of him rebounding at a higher rate. We've seen the stretches where he's at 7, 8, 9 rebounds, and I'd like to see that a little bit more consistently. And one thing for next season is if Rui does shift to the bench or maybe he still starts, but then they're staggering him and LeBron a little bit more, and he is playing more at the 4 in more traditional lineups. Like, I wonder if that potentially has any impact on his rebounding, and that there have been times he's had to play more out on the perimeter. So I give him some grace with that in terms of obviously if you're going to be playing, guarding 3s and 2s sometimes, that's going to limit your rebounding chances. But I do think in general his rebounding has been certainly below average and concerning at times, and that's an area of his game I think he really needs to improve on. Next up is Marcus Smart, and the low-hanging fruit here is something I talked about in Marcus Smart's film breakdown that I did earlier in the offseason. That's just limiting his pull-up three-pointers. He has shot consistently under 30% on pull-up threes during his career. It is a weakness in his game, yet he loves that shot. If he's primarily a catch and shoot guy, he's in the range you want him to be, in the mid to high 30s. But when it comes to his pull-up threes, that's what's bringing down his field goal percentage. That's what's bringing down his three-point percentage. So that's the low-hanging fruit. But I want to look at his D LeBron. And this is a metric from B-Ball Index. It's an all-in-one metric. They got LeBron WAR, which is wins above replacement, but they also got the overall LeBron, offensive LeBron, defensive LeBron. And looking at Marcus Smart's defensive LeBron, the last couple of years, we've seen some real slippage. This is color-coded here. You saw from 2016 through 2023, that was a dark shade of blue because it was between about 0.9 to 1.2 in terms of defensive LeBron. The past couple of years, 0.58 in Memphis, and then last season, first negative season of his career, minus 0.22. And I've talked about this before. I think a lot of this is circumstance, playing in Memphis, playing in Washington, also him aging a bit, him dealing with injuries. He only played under 700 minutes in both of those seasons, which were by far the fewest minutes he's played in any season of his career. The previous low was, looking at it quickly, 1,581. And so we can explain that away with the injuries and the aging and the team situation, but it is a little bit concerning if he's not going to be as impactful of a defender as he was in Boston. I remain bullish on Smart's defensive upside, and I believe there's a path to him returning to being the type of defender he was in Boston. Maybe not peak Boston, but close to that, right? He's only a couple seasons removed from being a really, really good defender from a defensive metrics standpoint. And even now, most of his defensive metrics are at least solid. But I think the key is going to be how they use him. He has been used as a wing stopper in 2 of the past 3 seasons. I've talked about this, but he has shifted toward being more of like a 3 defensively. And I feel like actually guarded up better than guarded down. Pull-up threes have to reduce, and that's going to be something that I think drives a lot of fans crazy is the shot selection. But again, I feel like that was a low-hanging fruit here. I think the more interesting thing to me has been the defensive regression in terms of being an impact. And again, we've seen like the numbers have been better in previous seasons, but the last couple of years, I think this is going to be the thing, aside from health, which is a big variable that we just don't know. I think the biggest thing is going to be, how does Marcus Smart defend? How impactful is he on that end? And can he return to being a great defender, an elite defender? Or is he more of just like a solid defender or like a good defender? Because I think the Lakers desperately need the former. And if he's the latter, that's still a bargain for the contract he signed. It's still a useful rotation player. But I think that does swing their upside and their ceiling, especially on the defensive side, depending on how good Marcus Smart is. So that's going to be the thing, just overall his defensive impact. And it's difficult to quantify, but D LeBron is one of the best stats at quantifying that. Shout out to Cranges, and it is something that I'm going to be tracking this season. Next up, we got Jared Vanderbilt, and this is another one that I'm going to be bringing back from last season, because looking at Jared Vanderbilt's effective field goal percentage and rim field goal percentage, they have been trending in the wrong direction for quite some time. So just looking at his Lakers sample size, and I am including the first half of the 2022-23 season, but just overall the last 3 seasons Vando has played, and there's been injuries and that has affected things, to be clear, but still have to look at this and break it all down. His effective field goal percentage has gone down from 56.4 to 46.3 to 53.4. And you see it went from below average to even more below average with in terms of percentile. But the rim field goal percentage went from 62% to 67% to 62%. And that is a career-long trend, actually, with Vando, where his rim field goal percentage, and this is per cleaning the glass, so I'm actually going to pull up his basketball reference rim field goal percentage, which is, they track it differently. For cleaning the glass, it's 0 to 4 feet. For basketball reference, it's 0 to 3 feet. But looking at his career trend here, so he improved after his rookie season from 61.5% to 71.4%. This was 17 games, 11 games, so very, very small sample size we're talking about here. But really from when he becomes a rotation player in Minnesota in 2020, 2021, he goes from about 72% to 71% to 72%. But really, if you look at his percentage with the Lakers, that was at 65%. So there was a big drop off there, then 69%, then 67%. So it's been going down from 72, 71, 72, but really 65 with the Lakers, 69, and then 67. So Vando has been regressing as a finisher around the basket, and I've said this a billion times, so I apologize for anyone that I'm driving you crazy with this, but like, the three-point shooting, I think at this point just is what it is. Maybe like he's actually got better as a corner three-point shooter, or had spurts where he's been better. So maybe that's something he could do a little bit more consistently. But like, I don't expect him to ever be anywhere close to an average three-point shooter. I think at this point, like, that ship has sailed, but I think he has to be able to make defenses pay with his offensive rebounding, with cuts, or with attacking the rim, attacking closeouts, and his inability to do that, and in his regression as a finisher and just as an offensive player overall, I think he's become more timid, and you're starting to see him turn down opportunities in the paint around the basket. Like, I think that's an area that he really needs to shore up. And again, we have seen him all offseason working hard in the gym, and we've seen the clips, and we'll see how much of that translates. But I think the big thing for me is going to be, can he make defenses pay for ignoring him? Because I think it's one thing to ignore him at the three-point line, which we see teams will put centers or non-defenders on him and just cheat off of him into the paint. And it's basically 4-on-5 offensively if the Lakers aren't using him in certain ways. But I think you start to see it a little bit more too, with even if he's cutting or moving in certain spots, like, teams aren't really respecting him. And I think he needs to be finishing at a higher level. And it's only been a minor drop off, 72% to 67%. But when you are used so infrequently offensively, and you're such a small part of just the offensive game plan, like, those opportunities matter. And I think there's been a compounding effect of it's decreasing, but the volume is also decreasing, and he's just not being as effective offensively as the Lakers need him to be. So I think there's a baseline level of just being an offensive threat, being a offensive contributor that Vando has been under the past couple seasons. And I think the Lakers need him to get back to being just the bare minimum of making a defense pay if they ignore you. And I think part of that's been athleticism and injuries and all the being in and out of the lineup and in and out of the rotation and just different things. But I think it's got to be better next season, especially considering he's got several more years left under contract. Next up is Gabe Vincent. And my focus for Gabe is his three-point shooting. So from a process standpoint, I think he's been trending in the right direction with his percent of shots that are threes. You saw it this past season, 28% of his shots were threes, which was a career high in the 100th percentile among combo guards. 45% of his shots were non-corner threes, which was 87th percentile. And then 73% of all of his shots were threes, 98th percentile. So Gabe, from a volume perspective and from the way that he's being used offensively, I think the process is right. I think with this group, Gabe is just not, like, you're not going to have the ball in your hands and be self-creating offense when you have Luka and LeBron and Austin Reaves ahead of you, to say nothing of now Deandre Ayton and Rui Hachimura. Like, I think at best Gabe is 6th in the pecking order, and I've even mentioned LaRavia, Dalton Knecht. Like, you could even argue 7th or 8th, depending on how the Lakers want to approach things offensively. So I think Gabe is going to need to be a catch and shoot spot up guy around, like, he's in that mold of a 3-and-D point guard. The issue with Gabe has been his 3-point shooting has just been inconsistent throughout his career. And you look at it this past season, like 100th percentile in quarter 3-point attempts, 48th percentile in quarter 3-point percentage, 98th percentile in 3-point attempts, 51st percentile in 3-point percentage. So I think the thing with Gabe is just getting more used to, like, he's such a rhythm-based player. He's talked about this before. He is someone who I think plays better when he has the ball in his hands, when he is getting shots up, but playing on this team, that's just not going to be his role. So maybe he is traded at some point in the future. I think he would probably be my betting favorite if I was setting the lines for Laker role players being traded. I think it's him, Maxi, and Dalton as the top three, and then Rui's probably a distant fourth, although depends if they're going after a wing. We'll see. But I think with Gabe, it's just... It's got to be better 3-point shooting, more consistent 3-point shooting. He's such a streaky player. He's such a rhythm-based player. If he continues to be a guy who's taking a lot of threes, or that's a big part of his shot diet, but he's not making them at a high clip. He's making them around league average, maybe even below that. Like that there's just a limitation there to, I think, his role on this team and his role really on a good team. Next up is Jake LaRavia, and this one is almost more of a question than a statistical category because Jake LaRavia is a little bit of a mystery box. We've seen him play in Memphis and a bit toward the end of last season in Sacramento, but it's been weird situations. It's been hard to glean how much we could take away or what specifically we can take away. And so the thing I'm focusing on with Jake is his 3-point shooting and the recent uptick we saw last season and just how much of this is sustainable and how he can scale it in potentially a larger role or a more high volume role. So looking at his 3-point shooting, 2 attempts per game, 34% his rookie year, 4.5 attempts per game, 34% his second season. So he increased the volume, more than doubled it, and actually improved slightly on the percentage. So he was able to scale it up. And then this past season, 2.2 attempts per game, 42.3%. So I think we saw it dip from Memphis to Sacramento and increase the volume a bit. He doesn't need to be a 42% 3-point shooter. Like that would be great. And maybe the Lakers would then have finally found the sharpshooter that has eluded them for seemingly, I don't even know how long. But if he can scale up to being more in that 3.5, 4.5 attempts per game and still be like high 30s, if not closer to 40s, like that is what the Lakers need. Because for some context here, Dalton Knecht averaged more attempts per game in 1 fewer minute, and Rui Hachimura averaged over double the attempts per game, obviously in more minutes, but like point being is I think the competition for Lakers best shooter or role player shooter is between Rui, Jake, and Dalton. And I think right now, among those three, the guy I have the most confidence in is Rui, as we've seen him do it now a couple seasons back to back, 40-ish%, upping his volume, also been a solid shooter in the playoffs. But I think Jake has the potential here to be the Lakers' best shooter among the role players. It's just how can he scale up and how sustainable, how real was the percentage jump last season? And is, again, as he tries to scale up to maybe 3 attempts, 3.5, 4, can he maintain high 30s 3-point shooting, or does he come back down to earth a little bit? So that's my question / area I'm focusing on with Jake. Next up is Jaxson Hayes, and I'll keep this one quick. It's just the fouling, his foul percentage. He's never been average among foul percentage. At best, he ranked in the 49th percentile his second season, but he's been on a downward trajectory since then. You see 49th percentile, 41st, 30th, 17th, 19th, and particularly his 2 years in LA, he's been bottom 20th percentile, which was right there with his rookie season. And fact of the matter is he just fouls too much. And this is an area of his game where he can be, like I've talked about Jaxson and sometimes losing his composure, and you'll see he'll then go pick up an offensive foul. He'll go push someone in the back and go get a tip dunk. He'll just pick up a reach-in foul or foul someone at the rim and then start to complain to the ref, and then you start to see the wheels turning, and then he kind of spirals. And for him, now that he's going to be in a backup role and he's going to be in this competition with Maxi Kleber for the primary backup 5 spot, Maxi is a steady veteran. We saw JJ go to him in game 5 ahead of Jaxson. There's been some buzz about Maxi and him returning to form this offseason, and we've seen some of the photos of him. He's looked like he's in great shape, and now he's going to be over 6 months removed from his surgery and stuff. So I think Maxi Kleber has a real shot to be the Lakers' primary backup five if Jaxson is not careful. Maybe it's more of I think it should be more situational and more matchup based on what the Lakers need that night with their bench units. I think Jaxson has a role in Luka-centric bench lineups. We saw the chemistry that those two had and how effective Jaxson was at times playing with Luka. But I think he needs to cut back on the fouling and the mistakes and getting into it with the refs and sometimes spiraling. And he's just such an emotional player. And it's okay if you're Luka, because Luka is the best player on the team and he's giving you 38 and 8 every single night. With Jaxson as a role player, as someone deeper in the rotation, like you can't fly that close to the sun if you're not going to perform and deliver. And so that's something that I think he's got to be cognizant of. Next up is Maxi Kleber. Speaking of Maxi, in the backup center spot, I think the thing I'm most interested with him is his 3-point shooting and its regression over the last few seasons. So looking at his corner 3-point shooting, it's gone down from 33% to 26% to 24% to 24%. Looking at his non-corner 3-point shooting, it spiked up actually from 33 to 39 to 41, but back down to 28 last season. And overall, his 3-point shooting has gone from 33 to 35 to 35 to 27. And as a stretch 5, as a stretch 4.5, whatever you want to classify him as, I think he's a stretch 5 at this point of his career. Like, part of that is the stretch. Part of that is keeping defenses honest and making them pay. And we saw a decline in that in Dallas over the last few seasons. And earlier in his career, you go back to 1920 or 2020, 2021, he's shooting 37% and 42% on corner threes. He's shooting 37% overall on threes and 41% on threes. So that's a big difference between 41% and 27%. And I think Maxi can be useful as a switchable, versatile defensive option and someone who can basically play in smaller lineups, but function more as a big in those lineups. And that's one of the things with mobile stretch bigs is that they do offer versatility. And I think he's more in line with the way that JJ wants to play. I just think there's a question here of he has been trending down for several seasons now in terms of his 3-point shooting. And can he bounce back to being the shooter he was earlier in his career? Or is this the new normal with him and he's going to be a below average and potentially even bad 3-point shooter? Because I would say if you're a 27% 3-point shooter, that is a bad 3-point shooter. That is someone who probably should not be taking, like, that's Vando territory. And granted, he was injured last year. He only played in 34 games, but he's also been injured the last 3 seasons, 37 games, 43 games, 34 games. So his body is wearing down. He has not been able to stay healthy, and there's been 3-point regression. So I think for him, that's the thing I'm most interested in is like, okay, he's in shape, he's healthy, but can he get back to being the player he was 4, 5, 6 years ago in terms of being a knockdown floor spacing big who really puts defenses in a bind because of his pick and pop ability with a Luka, with an Austin, with a LeBron. That's the thing I'm most interested with him. Next up, we got Dalton Knecht. And this one, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. It is the defensive end, going back to D LeBron. Last year, Dalton had a minus 1.07 D LeBron, which was the 44th worst mark in the NBA, the 8th percentile. And in other defensive metrics, he was even lower, or there was several. He was, I believe, in dunks and threes, defensive EPM. He's in the 1st percentile, which is basically as bad as it gets. So with Dalton, like, and look, if you look through some of these percentiles and rankings, sometimes you'll see good defenders in there. Sometimes you'll see other rookies in there. Rookies tend to trend worse defensively in terms of their impact. And there's a giant learning curve for players adjusting from playing overseas or in college and going to the NBA. So that is to be expected to an extent, but Dalton was just not a good defender last year. Was a detrimental defender, and that was ultimately the reason why he got pushed to 10th in the rotation and then ultimately phased out of the rotation in the playoffs. He had a concerning summer league on multiple fronts, but I would argue the defensive end, there was a lot of concerning. Like we saw an uptick in the playmaking a little bit, but he's getting beat off the dribble, line drive stuff, like the helps, the rotations, reading the game defensively. I think those are all real concerns with him. So I think this one is simple. Like he can't be a bottom 44 defender in the NBA and expect to be a rotation player on this Lakers team. It was the worst mark on the team. And I expect him to be better, but I think there's got to be some real growth on the defensive end for Dalton. Like either real growth as a shooter where he becomes the top 1% shooter in the NBA that JJ labeled him as. Like he's got to show that with his percentage. He's got to be like a low to mid 40s 3-point shooter and do that consistently. Or he's got to really grow on the defensive end. There is a path to him being a rotation player, but it is pretty narrow if he can't either dramatically improve as a defender or dramatically improve as a shooter. Next up is Bronny James, and my focus with him is deflections and just overall defensive activity and engagement. And I think we saw some promise with this. Looking at the Lakers player stats last season, Bronny actually ranked 5th on the team in deflections per 36 minutes. Shout out to Armel Traore for leading the team in deflections per 36 minutes. That guy was a walking human Red Bull can out there. And similar, he only played 55 minutes. Bronny only played 146. So in comparison with some of these other guys, but if you look at the Lakers leaders in deflections, you got Jared Vanderbilt 4.6, Cam Reddish 4.1, Jordan Goodwin 4.1. Those are some of the Lakers' best defenders, best perimeter defenders last season. So it's good company that Bronny's up there at 3.5. Luka's right there at 3.4. And Luka's very active with steals. We know he's one of the better defensive playmakers in terms of reading passing lanes and getting steals. And he did that at Eurobasket. He did that last season. So I think Bronny's in good company with that, with what we've seen from him, largely in garbage time, but occasionally in spot rotation minutes. So I think him doing that at a higher level and him jumping up into that Jordan Goodwin, Cam Reddish, or even pushing Vando for the lead among the perimeter guys, like that is what I would like to see from Bronny. I think I've talked about this before. I've been really encouraged and impressed with his offensive development as a ball handler, as a shooter, as a shot creator, as a playmaker. I think all those things are great. I think that the issue that he faces, at least with this current team, is he's never going to ascend higher than really, I think, 8th or 9th in the pecking order. And that might be even optimistic. So you've got Luka, LeBron, and Austin as the primary ball handlers. You got Rui and Ayton as big time finishers. You also got Gabe Vincent and Jake LaRavia and Dalton Knecht, I think, ahead of him in the offensive hierarchy. So it's like, I just don't really see the path to Bronny contributing offensively consistently. But what I do think is he has the upside and the defensive potential to be a game changer on that end. And if he can really hone that in and continue to develop on that end, as he talked about earlier in the summer when we talked to him at Summer League practice, like if he can do that and continue to do what he's done in garbage time and scale that up into potential back end rotation minutes, like that's where I think he could start creeping on a guy like a Gabe Vincent. If Bronny is outperforming him offensively, maybe he's shooting better than him, and all of a sudden he's being this impactful firecracker off the bench defensively who's pressuring 94 feet and wreaking havoc and leveraging his athleticism and speed. All of a sudden, that's the way I see a potential path for him to be a back-end rotation guy. I don't foresee that happening just because I think the Lakers have their top 9 or 10, and I think it's just going to be really hard for Bronny to crack that. But if there is a path to Bronny cracking the rotation, I think it's on the defensive end rather than the offensive end. Up to this point, Gabe Vincent has been a better shooter than Bronny, so I think unless Bronny really pops as a spot-up guy, I think the key is going to be him as a point-of-attack guy, as a defensive pest. And deflections is one category I'm looking at just because he fared well in that last season, but now it's about doing it at an even higher level. And finally, for Adou Thiero, it is simple. I want to see what his jump shot looks like. And we don't have much college data on that, but looking at his three-point shot over his 3 seasons, 2 at Kentucky, 1 at Arkansas, he shot 33% on threes, 32% on threes, and 26% on threes on 0.5 attempts per game, 0.9 attempts per game, 1.6 attempts per game. So we know that that is the one part of his game that needs to dramatically improve. And when Rob compared him to OG Anunoby on draft night, like OG is someone who has really improved as a shooter throughout his career from where he was at his rookie season. So I just want to see, like, we haven't seen him. We didn't get to see him in Summer League. We have seen some some clips or photos, videos of him in the gym, but I'd like to see what that jumper looks like at the NBA level. And I think that will determine, are we talking about like a Vando type player offensively in terms of some of the limitations, or is he like, I think he is someone who is a bit better in terms of getting out in transition and attacking, getting to the rim, finishing at the rim. So I think he's already ahead of say Vando as like a defensive stopper, limited offensive guy in that regard. But I want to know what we're working with offensively, and I don't think we'll have a good sense of that until at least the preseason, if not early in the regular season. But that will do it for today's show. Thank you all so much for watching and listening. For those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. For those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back later in the week. I'll talk to you then.